Welcome to the Delight Your Marriage podcast. You're joining me, Belah Rose, as I dive deep into the beauty, power, and truths about intimacy. Learn not only the practicals, but the heart behind what making love is all about. Delight your marriage. Hi there, welcome. This is Belah Rose, and I'm thrilled that you're joining me on the Delight Your Marriage podcast. So today I am thrilled because I have the honor of chatting with Sam Jolman, who wrote a book that we're going to get into, but it's really encouraging around male sexuality. And as you may know, we focus in on, actually, we call it Masculinity Reclaimed, is our program for men, which helps a man embrace what God made him as a man. And so this book is just so connected with our work, and I'm thrilled to bring it to you. Now, if you'd like to go through the 3-month journey and connect with other men, which Sam actually came and presented to our graduate program and the men there, and they got to have a wonderful time and ask direct questions and all sorts of things. So if you'd like to be part of that, go to delightyourmarriage.com/cc for a free clarity call, basically a consultation to see if we're the right fit, if we can help you. And we also have programs for women too. So husbands sometimes come and then the wives come. And so it might be a couple coming together and witnessing God do amazing transformations. So otherwise, let's go ahead and get into Sam's interview. I'm really looking forward to sharing this with you. All right, Delight Your Marriage listener, my goodness, today is such a special episode with Sam Jolman. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you, Belah. It's really good to be here.
Oh, it is an honor and really such a privilege because Sam has, just recently spoke to our men's group, our men's graduate program on Friday, which is awesome. But
hmm
your book, The Sex Talk You Never Got, masculine, masculine, I'm sorry, Reclaiming the Heart of Masculine Sexuality, which is so cool because our program is called
hmm
Masculinity Reclaimed. So it's hilarious. There's so many synergistic elements of your work, Sam. But when I was reading your book, there were literally times there were tears running down my face.
Mm.
And I don't know if that, I don't even remember the last time that's happened. And I just remember telling my husband, this book is going to help so many people. Like, this is
Mm.
going to help so many people.
Mm.
And so it's really, really special that you took the effort and the heart and the life that was required to write this book. And I've done this work for a decade now, and this is a very important book. So Sam,
Mm.
thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Mm. Belah, I know you know this as a writer, that is the best thing to hear back is how God
Mhm,
meets somebody in the pages and the words you've written. And
mhm.
I know you must know that from your own writing. So thank you for sharing that. I'm deeply humbled and grateful that God met you there. And that has been my prayer through the writing process. So yay.
Amazing. Yay. Okay, cool. Well, now that the listener's on the edge of their seat, what's so great about all this work? Well, we're going to get into it. But before we do, I just would love to share a little bit about Sam. He's a trauma therapist with over 20 years of experience specializing in men's issues and sexual trauma recovery. And so that is really incredible background for the work you do in this. But would you like to introduce yourself a little bit to the audience as well?
Sure. I always start by saying I'm a lover, I'm a father, I'm
Mm,
a therapist and an author, kind of in that order.
mm,
So I'm a lover. I'm a lover of Jesus, and have been since high school. I've been married for 22 years to my wife Amanda, and we are fathering. I'm fathering. We're parenting 3 boys who are coming of age right on the cusp. One just turned 13, 11 and 8. And so we're in the thick of that with these good a young man and a couple of coming of age boys. and we have a little dog as well. And I'm a therapist, as you mentioned, for 20 years. I get this incredible front row seat sitting with people and just never tire of that front row seat. And I'm an author, so I just wrote The Sex Talk You Never Got. And yeah, that fills up my life. It is a passion and a joy as well as a labor and all of those things.
Amazing. Oh, it's just amazing. Um, so I particularly enjoyed the way you laid out the book, how you started with um, like innocence, I believe. Well, first of all, you kind of painted this picture of men can be more than just the sum total of their sexual desires or their. And I was just curious. Maybe I'll ask you, how did you decide you needed to write this book?
Mm. Yeah, I think I sit with a lot of men as a therapist, and I sit in the privacy of a therapy office. So I get this vulnerable conversation. They know everything's going to be confidential. And I've noticed a couple of things. Uh, One is that men will say to me, and this has happened a lot, which
Mm,
is was surprising to me, given the culture at large. Men will say to me, I feel like I'm more like the woman in the relationship because I actually like the emotional stuff.
yeah.
And, or they'll say things like, I know I'm a guy and I'm just supposed to always, want to get it up and be ready. And yet, like, I need the romance. And I want that stuff. And I think they feel safe because they're in a counselor's office. Like I'm not going to go on blast with this, of course, but it's such a common thing, and there's so few places within the masculine culture at large to be able to own that you actually want relationship, you actually have a heart for it, you actually want emotional connection. Sure. You may also want sex and want it significantly, but that's not the only thing you want. And there's just a sense that's not a common picture of masculinity or of men in our culture, right? We have the warriors or the workers, right? The guys with grit. And that's a beautiful picture, right? It's good for a man to have that kind of drive and fight in him for goodness. But we don't have a lot of places where men are honored for their loving, their sensuality, right? The romantic side of themselves, the sensual side of themselves.
Mm,
So I just felt like, man, we've got to talk about this. I think as well, just my own reckoning with the Me Too movement and the Church Too movement and this disclosure and the larger culture of this, the abuses of male sexuality, anywhere from, significant sexual trauma, sexual harm or abuse, all the way down to just the daily catcalling or sexualized comments or sex jokes that are perpetrated on women. And I thought, man, I know that men are not just monsters, right? As that picture presents, right?
yeah,
We have the Christian story. We know that God meant something really good in Eden
yeah,
when he made men, when he made women too, obviously. But right there's something about
yeah,
men that was meant to be good and alive and sexual, and there's a goodness to that. And so I knew the story. God blessed something in men. So it can't just be monstrous at its heart. But
right.
that tension in the culture of like, is it just are men just fundamentally sexually broken?
Mm,
Um, and so anyway, that was the premise of like, I just want to invite men to a better picture of what it means to be a good sexual man, which
yeah.
can sound oxymoronic in itself, a good sexual man.
Hmm.
Um,
That's sad. It's
yeah,
sad that that would be oxymoronic, right?
right,
Um,
right. But it's not a compliment usually, right?
hmm.
Oh, that guy's a very sexual man. We
Hmm.
take as like, oh, that sounds dirty,
Right.
or he tends to be a sexualizer.
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, wanting to capture a better vision. I think along with that, was, when I sat with men, a lot of times the only way they kind of knew to talk about sexuality was, am I behaving or not behaving? So,
Ooh.
we would sit down, and if sexuality came up, it was often in the category of struggle with looking at pornography or struggle with lust, or, I'm behaving, or I'm not. And they didn't know, most men didn't know how to go beyond that to talk about what it means to be a good lover. So this good side of how to know that that's actually a gift to your wife, that how to be a good lover, a romantic, but also how to be a good lover literally in sexuality, in sex, in intimacy, but how to be emotionally connecting and how to draw at her heart or pursue her. And then also, just along with that, just how to even engage their own stories. Um, because a lot of times, guys, if we got past the behaving, not behaving conversation, would say, something like, "Oh yeah, there's some weird stuff that happened when I was a kid."
Mm.
And that was often a word, right? Oh, there's some weird things. Which is code word for, there's stories often of even outright sexual harm perpetrated against them that they had buried as their own perversion,
Yeah.
their own shame. And so just seeing how the evil one had sown shame, especially sexual shame, so early in so many men's lives and left them feeling like, guys would say sometimes, like, I plan to take this to the grave. Some of these stories, and there are stories of their own harm, of being harmed. And um, so just wanting like some other way to invite, um, as Dan Allender says, your brokenness is not simply just your sin, it's also your wounding, right?
Mm.
It's also the story of how you've been harmed. And most guys talk about sexual brokenness as, oh, you mean my sin. Uh, and so yeah, those things led me to say somebody has to write this. Um, and I hope I get the chance.
Yes. That is so good. That is so good. I love that you said it points to the wounding.
Mm,
The sexual sin. Yes, it is sin. And there are reasons. Um there are ways of
yes,
understanding what happened that are important so that you can
yes,
walk into a place of wholeness and holiness. Two different words, two different meanings.
yeah. Well said. Well said. Right. Like something sets us up.
Yes.
We crack along storylines usually, as I like to
Mhm.
say, like where we tend to sin, it is meaningful. It usually there's setup in our stories.
Right. Right. And I remember talking to different gentlemen, just in different settings where they're almost resisting the idea of, oh, I don't want to even go there because I hate the idea of being a victim.
Mm,
My choices were my choices. I'm not a victim. And I think the way I've approached it is this idea of, maybe you need a season of discovering what happened, why these choices were made, what what made you vulnerable to these temptations and these lies from the enemy and moving in that direction. Maybe it's a discovery versus a, oh, woe is me. I'll never have healing. And no, it's actually a process of healing. It's actually a process of discovering. Um,
yeah. Well said. Yeah. I think for men that posture of having to accept I've been victimized,
mm,
right? And there's obviously a difference between a victim posture as kind of a personality or excusing away any responsibility, right?
yeah.
What we're talking about is there's a difference between that and being just honoring where you've been a true victim. And you don't have to make that your personality. Um, but I think for men, as you've named well, there's a struggle with, it's such a powerless position, or at
Mm,
least it feels that way, right? Of like, you're telling me I was taken advantage of. And in one study I read, men were 4 times less likely to acknowledge sexual abuse in their stories. Now, again, victims of sexual abuse, men and women, are notoriously silent. It is the nature of evil to try to leave you feeling like it must be you.
Yeah.
And so to shut you down. But even when there is sharing between men and women, men are even less likely to acknowledge it. And this was a study done on documented, meaning a social worker had documented the truth and veracity of abuse had happened. And yet, only 16% of these men acknowledged it versus 67% of women would acknowledge it
Wow.
when asked directly. So, all of that is to say, yeah, there is something, maybe more so. I'm not saying that women also don't struggle with this, who have been victims of sexual abuse, but there's something about being silenced, right? Like it feels like it's my shame that I was powerless. Like I should have stopped it, right? If I was a strong man.
Right.
And so it can feel simultaneously emasculating, which
Yeah,
is terrible.
it is.
Um,
Yeah, even as young defenseless children, it's so painful.
yeah.
Um, well, you know, when you talk about men uh saying that they're a lover more than
Mm.
you've reframed it as this idea that men can be lovers even in, this culture that's like, well, almost men are defined by how much sex they're getting or how much they're, and instead of
Hmm.
this is no, like you sensual. I think one of the main points that I'd love for you to go into is the difference between sensuality. A lot, I think you might have said, um uh the issue is less about not having, like, having too much desire, and instead not having enough maybe of the right type of
Yes.
desire, something like that. Can you go into it?
Yeah, the issue isn't too much sexual desire, but too little heart, is what
Yeah.
I said at the beginning. And it what I mean by that is um that sentence in part comes from a journalist. Her name is Peggy Orenstein, and she said she did a bunch of research on like coming of age, like 18, I think it was teenagers through the college years. So maybe let's say like 16 to 25-year-olds. And uh she was just trying to discern, like, just get the pulse of those cultures as a journalist. And she said, in summary, if I were to give one sentence that summarized the issue for men and the issue for women, she said for women, the issue is the need to connect to their bodies.
Mm.
So the need to be able to own pleasure as their own,
Mhm.
and not just the pleasure of satisfying the man, which is what it tended to orient towards, but being able to explore and own their own bodies and their own pleasure as a part of sex. For men, the issue was
Mm.
connecting to their hearts, meaning there was this disconnection between what they were doing. And at times, these young men would even say, this goes against my heart,
Mm.
um, in terms of how they were acting. So what I what I would say for men in the masculine culture is there's again this battle to bring your heart to the act.
Mm.
You're the struggle is not that you're too sexual, right? It's that sexuality needs to be integrated with all that you are. So like, it's, say Song of Songs. If we take the male lover in Song of Songs, right? I mean, he's making love clearly to his bride, but he's also writing poetry,
I know. I know.
right? And it's poetry that's largely connected to all the other things he loves,
Yeah.
right? Like your navel is like a goblet of wine. There's a sense he is a connoisseur of wine, right? Or
Yeah.
your hair is like a flock of goats, right? Which might be not quite as much of a compliment these days. But, you have a sense that this is a shepherd
Yeah.
who enjoyed the beauty of the mountains and a flock of goats coming down the mountains. And that reminded him of his wife's hair. and the beauty of that. So, he's connecting. His heart is there as well as his body, clearly. But his heart is there, and he's waxing eloquent about his love for her. In other words, it's not just about getting off, it's about a sensual, intimate, knowing experience happening with his wife. And so, we don't have this idea of a sensual man, right? Is that as men, normally we're invited to push through, right? Life, like, have grit, kind of get through things. And it's less often that men take time for like sensuality. Like, I know men that enjoy it, like a cigar around a bonfire, right? Or something like that, right? Like, or the taste of a good meal. I one time at a men's retreat asked the guys, like, how many of you eat lunch or stop to taste your food? Right. And it was very low. Like most guys work through lunch, or if they eat, it's shovel, shovel, shovel. Did you even taste it? Did you even stop to enjoy the pleasures of life? Um,
Mm-hmm.
that being this lover side of you as a man, your capacity to take in sensual beauty, a
Yeah.
beautiful sunset, good food, the pleasure of your wife, her
Yeah.
body, her hair, like all of that, being more than, again, just this idea of getting off.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I wonder if I guess I have a couple of thoughts on that. One is, I think the pushback would immediately be, well, I wouldn't get anything done. I certainly wouldn't be able to keep my job. Like I've gotta work. I've got to push through. I like pushing through. I think that's makes me feel like a man to, get on more weight and like push, get the barbell higher. I don't know, you
Yeah.
know?
Yes. Well, okay. So you're talking to a CrossFitter, and again,
Oh,
I
see
am not a.
that. That changes everything, Sam. Why isn't that on your bio? Did I miss that somewhere?
It's tucked away in there somewhere. I
Tucked
think on
away.
some
Okay.
version of it.
Okay, very
Um,
good.
but and I'm not the 20-year-old, who's uh got his shirt off. I call it
Yeah.
dad bod prevention. But
Oh, I
nevertheless,
love
I
it.
I just did CrossFit this morning. And so yes, there are times in life. It's not that you're meant to only be a lover. You are also
Mhm.
meant to be a hard worker and to be loyal to a cause, to be a warrior in that sense and have a vision to fight for good. So there are times to push through, including CrossFit workouts where you're putting on more weight, and
Yes.
you have to find the mental stamina to say, I'm going to pick this bar back up and I'm going to keep going. That is good.
Mm.
And when that's not present in a man, that's also a problem. I mean,
Right, right.
when a man knows his wife is struggling
Hmm.
or his children are struggling and he's not willing to step into a hard conversation,
Yeah,
right? That's where I would say the lover and the warrior become join forces. Like,
yeah,
what does it look like for you to have a hard conversation of pursuit to your teenager?
yeah,
Or, um, do anything of worthy cause in the world. I mean, even just like getting out of debt, right? That's going to take the kind of warrior grit strength in you.
yeah.
So, yes, we're not saying this is just, you can always just be
Feel.
sensually engaged and feel
Yeah,
and we're saying there are times to push hard.
yeah. I love it. CrossFit. That's it. Those giant tires. Push them down the whatever they do.
That's
That's
right.
awesome. I love that. And I think it is like a almost like you've got boundaries of like, this is my time. It's almost like when you go into a museum, it's the context of the museum that makes this piece of art so powerful. But if
Oh,
it was
that's well
like
said.
on the side of the road going into the garbage, like you just wouldn't pause and ponder and observe and enjoy and gain pleasure from
Yeah.
observing it. Like I was in Philadelphia at the Rodin Museum yesterday, and I think it was inspired by your book. I think it was partially at least. I do love this doing this, but there was something that I was just like, I need more time here. And just like spending time looking closely at the thinking man, and just going
Mm,
over, literally putting my fingers where Rodin's fingers were, and like, how did he make these knees and this ankle, and just moving back. And he also has this beautiful sculpture of Adam, and just like, why is he in such a strange position? What was the communication? And just like, as you mentioned, gaining pleasure from the senses, walking from different perspectives and actually seeing this is excellence on display, that God is being glorified through this work.
mm.
If I just want to perceive it that way, if I look for it, if I gain insight through it. And I think this is a good, was there more you want to say? Because I was going to segue into awe, which
Mm.
was so powerful. That was such a powerful portion of the book. Maybe you can describe what awe is and why that's so vital.
Yeah. So, that's great. And what you just described is a version of awe. But
Mm-hmm.
awe is this, it's a studied emotion. And the best definition I read was from a research paper on it, where they described it as it's an emotion on the upper reaches of pleasure, but on the edge of fear, which right away sounds oxymoronic, right? Like, how could pleasure and fear be anywhere even near each other?
Mm,
Especially when it comes to sex, right? The idea of fear uh, seems instantly like a sign of danger, harm, abuse, right? Like, how could fear be a good thing?
mm,
But what I would say is when it comes to humans, it's largely about the idea of reverence. That, um, whereas something like, let's say, hookup culture, the anonymous kind of sex culture on college campuses, there's no reverence
mm-mm.
happening, right? There's no awe. This is just grab as much pleasure. Um, and oftentimes, sometimes not even that, because of the amount of alcohol present, meaning this is numb. So there's no reverence for the other person, right? So I think the basis that God intended for sex is awe.
Mm.
That we're meant to be moved by each other with pleasure, but also with a kind of reverence. And again, fear, the word I'd want to substitute there would be more vulnerability.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. Hmm.
Like something's on the line here. It doesn't
Yeah,
mean I'm in harm's way, but I'm exposing a part of myself.
exposing.
Literally the word vulnerability means able to be wounded. I think it's Latin or Greek. And and so this idea of like inherent in it is I'm putting my heart out here,
Yeah.
or I'm disrobing my body and in a way that I don't do with anyone else.
Mm.
And you have access to see me, really see me physically and emotionally, right? That's the kind of risk that's intended in sex. That's why the Hebrew writers called it knowing, right? Adam knew Eve.
Yeah.
Um, there's a sense of like, I see you.
Yeah.
I've pursued you. I know you. You've opened yourself to me. So,
Mm.
um, again, I think, we've held purity as this kind of implicit goal. And I know you've mentioned that in a recent podcast,
Mm. Mm.
um, which I enjoyed that conversation. And I I think a better goal, purity, is a part of the journey, no doubt, right? God calls us to be pure,
Mm-hmm.
which has a kind of fidelity and loyalty,
Mm-hmm.
right, to it. Um, and and yet I think God intends for us, our sexuality, to really be rooted in awe, that you would be moved by
Yeah.
your partner. I think of asking my wife out for the first time, and the I she actually shared her testimony in our college campus, our college chapel, we went to a Christian college. And it was the first moment I had awe. I was moved, by her beauty, but I was also moved by her story and by her spiritual depth. And um as I say in my book, it took me 2 years to actually get the courage to ask her out. And part of it is we didn't have a community connection. I'm giving excuses here for myself.
No, no, it was there were all sorts of terrible things. There were
Yes.
dragons in the who
Yeah,
knows?
that's
But
right.
all
That's right.
sorts.
I was off slaying dragons.
You were.
Yes. But I finally, I tell the story in the book. I had a friend that literally dragged me into a conversation to finally ask my wife out. And what is that? Well, again, on the upper reaches of pleasure, but on the edge of fear.
Yeah.
And I was an uninitiated lover. I did not have the courage of a lover heart yet to be that vulnerable. But there's this sense of, right, that risk of even that asking out, of like
Yeah.
pleasure and fear.
Yeah.
Again, pleasure and vulnerability.
Yes. Well, I love that you said I didn't have the courage yet of a lover's heart to be that vulnerable. Did I get that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think that's so powerful because so often I work with men who, I mean, they are tough on the outside. I mean, these guys are tough. Um, but they don't realize the vulnerability really is courage, as Brene Brown says, right? But
Yes.
it really is. Like that's when you marvel at somebody's courage, it's vulnerable. There's no way around it. Like writing this book, it's such it's such a unique book. Like it took so
Mm.
much courage for you. I know it did because it's so unique. It's so beautifully done and it's so it just really invites men to be to embrace a very different part and not to think that's not manly.
Yeah.
Jesus was the manliest of men and he wept knowing that his
Yes.
friend died. He was drawn to compassion when the woman lost her husband and he was moved by compassion over and over and over again. He slept on a cushion. You might have said that in your book. He slept on a cushion. Like he cared about why are these things matter? Like why was his first miracle about wine at
Yeah.
a party? Like
At a
why?
wedding.
At a
Oh,
wedding.
he's a romantic.
He's a romantic. They accused him of being a drunkard and a feaster, like
Yeah.
a glutton. That was it. I mean, clearly he didn't mind the actual pleasures of this life, and I
Mhm.
just think that's incredible to think he was the manliest of men. And yes, he did push through. You know, he did push through in the context when it mattered, right?
Mhm.
He pushed through and had a cross on his back and complained not. You
Mhm.
know, he didn't let his and so it's this there are contexts. It's not I don't think we need to throw the bath out baby out with the bathwater. I'm not interested in a bunch of whiny men, just
Mhm.
whatever for no
Mhm.
reason. But like there is beauty and goodness. The joy of the Lord is our strength. Why would we not lean into the things that could in fact be God's gift to us to bring joy to ourselves and life and so much good. So,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Well said. It being a wise and good man with cunning,
mm,
really, you know, uh, uh, to be shrewd as a snake and innocent as a dove, uh, is to know the time to exert strength and when to restrain strength. And that's really the heart of a warrior. A warrior is not a savage who just charges a field, right? A warrior really knows when it is largely about restraint. I know when to exert my strength and I know when to hold it. Um, as a CrossFitter, it is so important what you're doing in your rest minutes, not just what you're doing when you're lifting the bar, but how you're
mm,
conserving energy in those pauses in the workout. And so I think, like you said so well, like Jesus, the story I tell in the book is of Jesus with, you know, the um the woman, the sinful woman who comes and bathes his feet with a
Mm-hmm.
bottle of pure nard, right? And they're like,
Mm-hmm.
dude, do you not know who's touching you? Like, it's a
Mm-hmm.
very sensual scene,
Yeah.
but it doesn't cross into being a violating scene. Jesus doesn't
Mm.
objectify her. He's not
Yeah.
sexualizing the moment with her,
Mm.
but he is receiving the sensuality of this loving act. She is weeping. She's,
Yeah.
bathing his feet with pure nard. Obviously, it would be very aromatic.
Mm.
And she is caressing his feet and kissing
Mhm.
them like, it no wonder at some level they're like, dude,
Yeah.
is this okay? And
Mm.
he's like, relax. This is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
He knows how to receive that moment. I would say because he's sexually whole. He knows this isn't a moment he's sexualizing her, but
Mm.
he is receiving the tenderness of what she's offering. Um,
That's beautiful. I just love that. I love that so much. And I almost want to comment on you talked about when to exert your strength and when to self-restrain it. And I might even say, the strength is also in self-constraint. That's strong
yeah.
to
Oh, that's
say
good.
the self-discipline.
Yeah. Well said. The mental strength there. You're right. And the
Mm-hmm.
wisdom, the
Mm-hmm.
the savvy,
Mm.
right? Of
Mm-hmm.
knowing of that. There is a mental strength. I like that.
I almost wonder if it's like exerting effort takes
Mm.
strength and restraining effort takes strength. But
Yeah.
I just love all of this, and I want to make sure we get to the part around that really made me tear up and why I think women should read this book as well, like would really benefit from reading this book. But why men should read this book is because what you talk about with the awe of a man observing his naked wife. You
Mm.
talked about this you specifically um, quoted somebody talking about describing their wife as the glory of his wife's body, and you talk about the glory that God put in humans, and the yeah, maybe you could speak to that a little bit, and then I'll comment some more.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a quote from Mike Mason, and he's describing his experience of seeing his wife naked in their first year of marriage in particular, but just the you know uh we tend to think of like clothing, at least a version of the story I've heard is that clothing was there to cover our shame, right? Adam and Eve
Mm,
sinned and the clothing is to cover their shame. And as I was writing this book, I was just researching this idea of glory and awe and began to recognize that in the Bible, it is glorious things that are actually covered, like the Ark of the Covenant is covered. The Holy of Holies is covered.
yeah.
And then it gets, wild into like actual glowing bodies like Moses' face, right? When Moses comes down from Mount Sinai with the Ten Commandments and he's been with God, his face is glowing, and they literally can't handle it. It's too glorious, which is just wild. And
Yeah.
they say, please cover your face, which is where we get the veil,
Mm,
the symbolism of the veil for a bride in our modern day wedding ceremonies, right, is straight from Moses, meaning like we know,
mm,
the glory of God's artwork in your body.
yeah.
And we have a very emaciated view of that in our culture, right? We have beauty standards that are just so abusive of
Mm,
the limitless glory of God in our bodies. Your body is glorious, period.
yeah.
It is not a need to meet a standard in our culture.
Right.
Um, and then, the story of Jesus glowing with his disciples and they fall down in awe, right? Again, everybody is experiencing awe. And this quote from Mike Mason was just, he was acknowledging just how his wife's body stirred him to to worship God for his artwork, basically. Like, she being this harbinger of glory, of God's limitless glory. So yes, and again, even our sense of beauty, as I wrote in the book, research says that we are most moved to awe by other humans in what's called moral beauty.
Oh,
So it's
love
it's
it.
not just the picture, of what is your body like and
Mm-hmm.
is your body attractive,
Mm-hmm.
which can get troublesome in the sense of, well, what standard? But um but this writer was talking about how we are most moved by what he calls moral beauty, which is this kind of courage, this overcoming or persevering. When we see somebody persevering, stories of overcoming, that moves us.
Mm.
So, back to when I saw my wife and heard her story of coming to God, I mean, it was a story of moral beauty. What she suffered to become a Christian and how she came to God. And I mean, so again, back to what is intimacy. If you're going to know your wife's beauty, if you're going to be intimate with your wife's beauty, is not just her body. It is also her heart. It's her story. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't know her story, if you
Mm-hmm.
don't know her story of overcoming or just witnessing on a daily basis, right? Like, wow, you you handled that moment with our child with such peace or wisdom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or I watched you tackle your tasks of the day. Uh, you did so well. Or even something as simple as like, man, you crushed cleaning this kitchen. Or I know you had that hard conversation with your coworkers. Well done. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are as much beauty as what your wife looks like. And we need to recognize, in our culture, we tend to think very visually, like it's
Mm-hmm.
visual, and that's beauty. And that's such a small, narrow window to know beauty within, especially
Mm-hmm.
human beauty.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I totally agree with the need for men to notice that, because similar to what we're talking about of um, being in a museum and noticing things because you're in the context of that museum, the context of your marriage, this is the person you get to notice all the beauty, all the goodness, all the glory of who this person is. And yes, she is God's masterpiece, as it talks about in Ephesians 3. God
Mm,
doesn't make junk.
yeah.
Who was telling me? Somebody was telling me recently, I think it was my executive assistant. She was like, something about Bella, you're beautiful. And I was, I don't disagree. You know why? Because I know who made me, and he's pretty amazing. So, I can't take credit for it, but I'll certainly agree that God did a great job. And
Oh, that's
really,
great.
what if we saw ourselves that way?
Yeah.
Because that's really what you're inviting us to see is God's glory in our bodies. And then you're inviting men to sensually experience your wife, not just sexually, but sensually. And notice her hair, and notice her eyes, and notice her thighs, and notice her fingers. And
Hmm.
all of that is God's glory. Now it's within the context of noticing your wife. Like she's the
Hmm.
one that you get to have your focus on, that grows your appreciation and it grows
Hmm.
your understanding and insight. And as you said, her moral character as well, like just how or you said moral glory. Did you say moral glory?
Moral beauty was the
Moral
word.
beauty.
Yeah, but more
Yes.
moral character. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, but one thing I thought, and this that brought me to tears was, you said, with this husband observing his wife in the way that he describes, which is just so magnificent, similar to the Song of Solomon's kind of romantically observing his wife's beauty and almost hard to look at. She's so gorgeous and it's like a
Yeah.
thousand sunsets and these sorts of things. That's exactly what a wife wants to experience from her
Mm.
husband. Like
Mhm.
that's exactly it. So it's so fascinating that you're teaching men to say this is actually as a man who you get to be. And then for me as a woman to listen to that and say, that's exactly what she wants. Like that's it.
Mhm.
And not And the beauty, I think, the cool thing about you describing it is you're not trying to get men to please their wife by observing her in this way. Instead, you're just saying, this is the pleasure available to you, and this will get you out of this laser, like almost like putting on blinders, like a horse that has blinders on. You're not able to observe the vast goodness that God wants you to, because you're just focused on this one thing when there's so much more pleasure to be gained elsewhere as well.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yes. And in other words, that's back to bringing your heart along,
Yeah.
right? In the act of sex, romance, marriage is what you're describing. Like, um, you know, sex is a great gift of stress relief. It can be a great gift of exercise. It can be a
Yep.
great gift of comfort. It can be a great
Yeah.
gift of connection and play.
Mhm.
But it is also meant to be a great gift of emotional connection, intimacy, of beauty.
Mhm.
And there's a philosopher that said something like, whenever we play well, beauty is the fruit. Meaning it always produces more beauty. And
Mm.
so, your heart for your spouse, for your wife will only grow deeper the more you can let yourself be in awe. Um,
Yes.
and being in awe is really not about, it's really about letting yourself be open to seeing, um, and just stepping back to behold more.
And you even said this is connected to humility. And I think that's just true. It's so true.
Yeah. Yeah. There are studies that the most humble people in the
Mhm.
world experience the most awe,
Oh,
which is like, whoa, what? Like,
that's fascinating.
that's so fascinating to me. And that it's synergistic. So the more you experience and are open to awe, the more humble you become.
I love that.
Yeah, isn't that just
Yes,
cool of God to make
that's really
pleasure
cool.
connected with humility like
It
that?
is so cool. You are
Yeah.
so right. So that gives all of us more motivation to pursue awe and pursue experiences and notice the beauty and grace, because we know humility is God's will for all of us. That's the one that kind of it's almost like pride is the one that undermines all the good, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
humility is the one that, like, okay, gives us more insight. And I just love that. Oh my gosh, because part of me is thinking, um what's the purpose? Let's get to brass tacks. Why is there value in this whole nonsense about pleasure, et cetera, et cetera? But if we think
Right.
about it as like, this is an opportunity to be more like Christ, to be more humble, to be in awe of his goodness. And isn't that what we're supposed to do in worship? Is
Mhm.
be in awe of God, which is,
Yes.
you have this gorgeous, and I can't, again, that's why I'm so encouraging people to read the books. I can't go into it enough, but you talked about the fear of the Lord, really as in
Yes.
awe of God. And I guess there's, something I didn't notice that you talked too much about, but probably because you're trying to uh correct something that's kind of been in the wrong zone for enough. But I'm sure you would, I mean, there is trembling to it as well. There really is a,
Hmm.
like, you could smite me in a moment,
Hmm.
but I'm responding to this awe of, like, God, you're so glorious. You're so
Yes.
glorious. You're so amazing. Yeah, tell me more.
Well, God, yes. Like it's not just made up. When we say fear or
Mm,
reverence, we're not just making it up like you need to act like you're afraid, right?
mm,
Like when I think of experiences of awe I've had, like going to the local zoo we have and being behind that 1 inch thick glass, between me and the lion. And to see the roar and hear the roar
mm.
of a lion literally a couple feet from me. I mean, it is awe-inspiring, and it is very much clear, that this being has
Mm.
power. and could
Yeah.
destroy me. And so, you know, I think of Isaiah in the throne room of God. It is not fake trembling, as you named. It is genuine um, trepidation
Mm.
at the sheer power and of God. What I'm trying to tease out is, you know, this idea of what is something that we are both afraid of, but also simultaneously drawn to,
Mm.
right? Whenever an angelic being or God visits anybody in the Bible, they tremble, right? Like, you know, the shepherds receiving the announcement of Jesus'
Yeah.
birth, right? It
Yeah.
says they were terrified. And is why the angels always have to say, "Hey, hold on. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here for good." Right? And I think that's what God wants. He doesn't want us just terrified of him and therefore complying out
Hmm.
of sheer fear.
Yep.
There's this sense of, yes, we are meant to reverence him, but also to be drawn to him. There's a pleasure, right? There's a sense of you know, the shepherds, you know, leaping with joy of the goodness of the announcement of Jesus' birth. And they run to go find him, right? I mean, in a sense, it's ending in pleasure. So I think that's what God wants. He doesn't want you just afraid of him.
Hmm.
He wants you to reverence him, but he also wants you to be drawn to him,
Yeah.
right? And even Isaiah, right? The angel comes and touches the coal to his lips, like, we're gonna make a way for you to be here.
Mm.
Um, uh, I believe, you know, that is God's heart, is that we would reverence him but be drawn to him, as we are reverent with each other,
Mm.
in the glory of God in each other.
Mm. Mm. So I didn't even spend any time on play because that is just so great. And as you know, dear listener, we talk about playfulness all the time and how important that is to your marriage. And so it's so cool that you talk about, um, can you just briefly talk about the story of Abraham and Sarah and
Oh
you had a
yes,
great bit there.
yeah. So you know, I think it's actually Isaac and Rebekah. Now that I remember,
Oh, really?
but this I think so.
Oh,
It
dag
so
nabbit.
well, there's a mirrored story in Abraham's life. So
Oh, so maybe
you're
that's
not
how I got it
wrong.
mixed up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, but
But
of
keep
Abraham
going.
and Sarah. But
Okay.
but like his father, Isaac lies to a king and says, you know, there's a famine in the land. God tells them go harbor in the Philistine land.
Okay.
And King Abimelech, I think it is. And Genesis 38, I think this is 36. But yeah, he, you know, he goes to this land and he's terrified because his wife is beautiful. He's terrified he's going to be killed um because the men are going to want his wife. And so he says, "Hey, let's have this little deal." Interestingly, even though God promises to protect him.
Yeah.
So God already promised to protect him. You're going to be fine. I'm sending you here so you survive this famine. Nevertheless, he resorts to his own resources, his own defense. So they lie to the king. And then it says, you know, one day the king is looking out the window and he sees Isaac and Rebekah doing
Oh,
something.
wait. So he lies to the king that Sarah's not his wife, right? That's
Yes.
okay. Sorry. Keep going. Okay.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
might have said it.
And
I somehow missed it. Okay. Keep going.
yeah, he tells the king, um, and there's the reason why you're remembering Abraham and Sarah is because the identical thing happened for Abraham and
So
Sarah. He
crazy.
lied to a king. Anyway,
So
we could
crazy.
talk about generational sin there, but nevertheless, um, Isaac, it says the king is looking out the window and he sees Isaac and Rebekah doing something, and he's instantly very clear about the fact he's been lied to, and he sends for Isaac and he says, "You are lying to me. She's your wife." You know, and so what did he see them doing? Right? Is it's clearly some stage of the act of making love, right? I don't know to what degree, but interestingly, the writer uses the word to describe what they're doing. He uses the word that translates, it gets translated in the NAV like caressing, and other translations like kissing or fondling, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the word literally means to play, that they were playing together. It fascinatingly, the King James version calls it sporting, which is like hilarious. I guess they called it sporting back
Sounds like
in,
polo.
yeah,
Like,
right. That's what
so
the kids
funny.
called it back in
That's what
the
they call it, the sporting.
King James era. But nevertheless, in other words, he's using the language of play for sex.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, as I write in my book, sex at its essence is a form of play.
So cool.
It's not meant to be just this demand to fulfill a need.
Mm-hmm.
That at its heart, it needs to maintain this play spirit to it.
Yeah.
Now, again, it can be serious. It can be unto comfort. It can be unto having children. It can be unto stress relief, even if if that feels mutual in your marriage. Um, but at its heart, it's meant to be a form of play. And
Yeah.
we have it in our language a little, right? We talk about foreplay,
Yeah,
right? The
right.
play, the beginning play.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and but it's meant to be all play.
So
And
cool.
and we understand at some level it's physical, it's relational. You're not competitors, right? In a sense of a game of play, but it's
Mm-hmm.
more like dance, right?
Mm.
It's this uh um commingling of bodies unto
Mm-hmm.
what? Pleasure,
Yeah.
right? Pleasure to the glory of God, pleasure as an act of love. We're going
Mm-hmm.
to give and receive pleasure. Um uh and as a gift of love to each other. Um and again, I don't think it's the only place we're meant to play. In fact, if it is, something's going to feel overburdened on it, right?
Yep.
If you don't have other places you play in your marriage,
Right.
I think it's why dating, right? Have starting to have a culture of play in dating, that you engage in play is so important. But that continues. Um, and that this is meant to be one of those places.
Agreed. Agreed. And I love that. And I love that that starts with making more and more of your culture playful and making up games with each other and have play. And again, for its own sake, in a like this is joy. Why are we rushing
Yeah.
past joy? This is a fruit of the spirit. This is an opportunity to gain if we really believe the joy of the Lord is our strength and God is giving us opportunities for
Mm,
joy all the time, if we just pause and enjoy them, then the worst suffering imaginable gets better when we choose joyful experiences, etc. And it
yeah.
reminds me of Paul, on house arrest saying, "Rejoice in the Lord always." Again, I say rejoice.
Mm,
Like
hmm.
that is what's getting him through these hard situations.
Hmm.
Um, so there's so much
Yeah.
value to it. And I guess the
Yeah.
final, oh, go ahead.
No,
I
that's
would
great.
say the final thing that I love about your comments around play is it makes this act of sex so less threatening to women.
Mm,
It just turns it into like, oh, if this is just playing, if this is just fun, it like I think men honestly have a much easier time thinking about sex as fun than women do. Women are just like,
mm,
well, there's a purpose, so he's not crabby for another 3 days, and
mm.
then we're gonna have some
Yeah.
peace in our home and blah blah blah. But
Yep.
if it's like this is like there's fun in this. This is a game. This is enjoyable. This is exciting. There's not pressure for all sorts of things. Like this
Hmm.
is fun. And
Hmm.
we talk about there's so much different variety that can happen in sex. It doesn't have to even culminate in an orgasm every time. It can be all sorts of things, or there can be intimacy that's just relaxing and caressing and etc. that doesn't necessarily move towards intercourse,
Yes.
or there can be marital aids involved. There can be all sorts of things, but if it's not this, we've got to get to this end goal,
Yes.
yeah.
Right. And you're bringing up such a good point of like, it is important to ask, like, if sex doesn't feel playful, to ask the question of what's burdening it.
Mm.
Uh, because play, by definition, in some of the research I read, play by definition was meant to be, uh, it, it can't be under duress, meaning you're forced, nobody's forced to play and plays well, right? And children know
Yeah.
this, right? Like when
Yeah.
they ask each other, want to play? Right? Like there's always consent, right?
Always.
Hey, do you want to play with me?
Yeah.
They just know play has to be consensual, that you want to be there as much as I do.
Right.
Or it will feel burdensome. So, beginning to ask like what kills the play mood? Is it that it feels like we have to reach an end, or maybe there's, hey, it feels like you don't play well,
Hmm.
or you play selfishly, or we have parts of our story that get in the way, right? What takes away the playful spirit? And by playful I don't mean unserious, meaning it can feel tender and connecting and
Yeah.
passionate just as much. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be goofy, right? In
Right.
that
Right.
sense, but just that sense of I feel free
Yeah.
to be here, and I feel free to say no if I need to.
Mm-hmm. And
But just
stay connected, emotionally connected. A no doesn't have to be a disconnect. It can still be
yes.
a I'd love to probably another time. I'm having a just focused on something else right now.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have to be a no. And that can be hurtful, but if we can make it gentle, tender, loving another time. Anyway, keep
Yep.
going. Sorry to interrupt. Hmm.
Yeah, and even asking questions around like because that, like you're naming well, that transition from task mode, mother
Mm.
mode, father
Hmm.
mode,
Hmm.
work mode to play might need help. Like, hey, I need to talk about my day first, or
Yeah,
I need to
absolutely.
do this repair about this thing you said to me
Hmm.
so that I can feel connected and playful with you. Or just not right now. How about later?
Hmm.
You know, to not take it, as you said, as personal rejection.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. I love it. Um, yeah, I'm thinking of some kind ways of saying it that does honor that somebody's being vulnerable, because whoever is approaching sex is the vulnerable one, and sex asking for sex is extremely vulnerable. If the response is, "Oh, honey, that's wonderful. I think
Mhm.
I'd like another time," or "Gosh, I'm just not in the zone right now. Do you think maybe tomorrow, or just
Mhm.
I'm just not really, I can't get there right now, but I really
Mhm.
do love you." Something that doesn't, because we don't need to break connection when we say no to something that's so tenderly part of their hearts, men's hearts.
Yes.
It's sex is really, really important and should be honored and encouraged, and yet doesn't have to be yes every time.
Yes.
But it
Yeah.
can be still connected and honoring and loving um okay, well, I guess I know I haven't asked you everything that I wish I could, but can we wrap this, Sam, by you praying
Yes.
for somebody who might be listening, who needs some encouragement? Sex
Mm.
just has not been maybe the way we're talking about it. It's not
Mhm.
innocent and positive and good. It's very different than that. And I
Mhm.
would love for you to
Mhm.
maybe pray for the husband or the wife listening.
Yeah. 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 That's great. Happy to do that. Jesus. Um, I'm so grateful for your playfulness in the world. God, I think about how you resurrected and played with your disciples, appearing and disappearing, and um, playing peekaboo almost with them and surprising them. And I'm just so grateful for your victory over sin, over evil,
Hmm.
even over our own shame.
Yeah.
And God, I know the evil one wants to kill our playfulness, wants to bury our sexuality in shame,
Mm,
wants to bury it in silence and secrets. And
mm,
um, God, I pray for the men and women listening. God, for you to reveal with them um, what it is that has taken away their sense of innocent playfulness, what has taken away their sense of awe for sexuality. God, I just pray right now for you to begin to shine light where shame has held such a strong grip,
mm,
where there might even be buried memory, or even just present day struggle. God, I am so grateful that you always approach us with kindness. And I ask for your kind spirit to be with them now as they reflect on their story, reflect on where their playfulness has been lost. And God, lead them, speak to them, new, fresh hope. God, living hope, not positivity, but the hope of your resurrection, that they can change, they can grow,
mm,
they can
mm.
heal here, they can recover their innocence and playfulness. In your name, Jesus, and for
Mhm.
your glory.
Yes.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. Thank you, Sam. This was
Belah,
awesome.
thank you.
What would you like to share with these husbands and wives that just what you're up to, how can they follow you, etc.?
Yeah, I would love you to buy my book, of course, that you can get it wherever books are sold. And my publisher is actually still doing a buy one, get one free offer. So you
Wow.
can, yeah,
Amazing.
you can get the audiobook or the Kindle edition. I was able to read the audiobook, which I was so grateful for. And they'll send you
So
a
good.
paperback copy if you go to my website, samjolman, JOLMAN.com. And I write on Substack, ongoing conversations on just diving deeper into things in the culture, in the Christian story, stuff I couldn't fit in my book. And so would love you to join me there. And then I do monthly conversations with subscribers on those posts.
So cool. So cool, Sam. Well, I really do mean it. I really believe this is a new level of insight that will be important, really
Mm,
important. I don't often recommend books quite so strongly, and my listeners will know. So I
mm,
really am really excited for you to get this out there. Thank you for what you've done
mm,
here. It's big.
mm. Thank you, Bella, and thank you for your community. It's such a privilege to join you guys. It's such a good place.
Oh, yay. Well, they loved having you. They loved it. So thanks again, Sam. Oh my goodness, wasn't that awesome? I'm so thrilled to have you. Hopefully, listen to that, um, read his book, whatever that your next step is. But otherwise, if you're interested in healing your marriage, so it's a little, it's obviously important with sex as your spouse is required for intimacy, but also understanding how do you interact with your spouse so that they're interested in making love with you. And that's a huge part of the work we do because you need to heal the emotional connection between the two of you so that intimacy is something that happens and is enjoyable for both of you. So delightyourmarriage.com/cc. Otherwise, I hope that you enjoyed this conversation with Sam, and yes, may God bless you both.